My first event, my first call, was a flipped over car in the ditch, and I was the only one little enough to crawl into the car. And so here I am, I'm inside the car, I've got this fella, he's bleeding all over the place, he's bleeding all over me, and he's upset, and he's semi-conscious, and he's having a really big struggle, and I'm like, we're here to help, it's gonna be okay, and I'm holding on to him, and they're cutting the car away from me, and I'm like, this is what I'll do for the rest of my life.
I'm lucky. I've never been in an ambulance, but I've called ambulances a couple of times, and I've seen a loved one driven away in the care of people I've never met and that I'll probably never see again. I put my wholehearted trust in them, and they made a life and death difference in my world. And I don't even know their names.
So my name is Chris, otherwise known as Bucky. It stems from my last name, Buchner, and yeah, so most of the guys call me Bucky for short. It's just a whole lot easier.
I see them almost every day, and it always makes my adrenaline rush. There's something about the lights and the shrill sound of the siren. I know there's an emergency. I try to get out of their way because if it was me in there, I'd want them to hurry. I can't help but stare a little bit. It's exciting and scary at the same time.
Danger is just a commonality of our job. Not everybody's happy to see us. Just because they called 911 does not mean they want saving. So the ambulance themselves are all GPS tagged now. So when this one starts to move off the property, dispatch then knows that it's out and about. Mm-hmm. So I'm letting dispatch know, hey Ryan, it's Bucky 06.
So yes, I get to ride in an ambulance. I think this is really cool. In fact, I think you'll hear me say that very thing when he hits the siren for a second. Yes, I asked him if I could hear the siren. It's like meeting your favorite superhero and being let in on the secret powers. Cool.
Ambulance driver or paramedic, which am I? I drive an ambulance. I am a paramedic.
Good.
Good.
My skill set is such that depending on what area I'm in, I would be a paramedic, or I would be an EMT, or I would be a basic life support paramedic, or I would be a primary care paramedic, or I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. So what am I? I'm a caregiver in the medical system. So welcome to the back of my world. What we have here is...
Chris knows his stuff, and he obviously loves it all. He decided what he wanted to be when he grew up, and he became that. He couldn't wait to show me his new stretchers.
And then the quintessential moment.
His road here started in a small town in the Kootenays. He moved his family to the greater Vancouver area because that was where most paramedics got started with full-time work. He worked on call all over the lower mainland of British Columbia, then at stations in New Westminster, North Delta, and then Station 49 in Surrey, BC, one of the 5 busiest stations in North America.
And I was there for 5 years working the Wally district of Surrey and loved it. Loved it. I could be laying down in a ditch with somebody that's just flipped over their car. The next call, I'm, with somebody, a street person, heroin overdose, narcotic overdose, bringing them back to life, then whip over to a care home for a sweet, sweet little old lady who's had a fall and maybe hurt her hip or her knee. You just never knew, right? So one minute you're doing something, the number of times that I had weapons pulled on me and high intense situations followed right after by, oh honey, can I get you a cup of tea? Because that's all she really needed, was just a cup of tea in the middle of the night.
There's a lot of adrenaline pumping in this job, but it is so clearly not all about that. Paramedics like Chris seem to feel a calling. They're willing to put themselves in dangerous and disturbing situations so they can help. Really, really help. Not like, can I get you fries with that, but can I save your life kind of help.
Does anybody come back and thank you?
Some. Not often. we're kind of, almost like a secret service, right? Because we swoop in, we deal with it, we swoop out, we drop them off at the hospital. They spend the least amount of time in my world, and sometimes they get the most life-saving technique in this few moments. We need to, between advanced life support and basic life support, be able to do resuscitation and multi-system traumas no different than what's going to happen for you, your patient, or anyone else in the ER. And that's really what these trucks are. These are a mobile trauma room. So I've been doing this job now for 23 years, coming up on my 24th anniversary. I started back in 1993.
Chris is at Station 206 in Chilliwack, British Columbia. It's very chill. Everyone is nice, there's music playing in the garage, but this is the calm before and after the everyday storm.
Sometimes we're over top of that little child who has been beaten or thrown down a flight of stairs. Mom, Dad, both are standing over top of us while we're working on this child. And, where does that put us? We don't have the police there, right? Because this was just simply a fall down the stairs and the child is unconscious or dying. And now we have the assailant, Mom or Dad, standing right over top of us. I've walked into homes, drugs everywhere, guns, knives, party houses, crack shacks, hoarders' homes. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on of scary, dangerous places we end up. Grossest thing I've ever seen, every paramedic will answer the same thing: my paycheck. So,
Yeah, I did ask, what is the grossest thing you've ever seen? Sorry, I was curious. As you can see, Chris is an affable guy. He's funny, easy to chat with. But let's put this in perspective. I'm not sure I could deal with some of the situations he's experienced. It's sensational on television. I don't imagine that it's very sensational when it's happening right in front of you.
you always remember your first, and you always remember your worst. But your worst is always replaced by the next worst. And unfortunately, many of our guys lose the rest of their career because they can't take that latest gross call. There was an event in Maple Ridge where the young man was dragged by a car for many, many kilometers. You know, very, very disgusting. Murdered children, very, very horrific. So it's, you can't isolate that. You know, the documentation, the books every paramedic could write would be exhaustive, and they'd all be the same stories. We all end up subjected to the same things, and there's nights when, you know, we don't sleep real well because of it. It looks very spacious right now, but when you put a patient here, you bring a fireman in to do CPR, you have your 2 advanced life support people in here and a basic life support guy in here, and everybody's trying to get access to this 5.5 foot piece of equipment with the patient on it. And then let's just throw one additional thing into the mix. He happens to be a prisoner or a suspect in some kind of a large event. We now have 1 or 2 officers up there. So this is a really small place for, you know, 5, 6, 7 people. And if you do a seatbelt count, you'll find out there's not enough. So when people don't pull over, this is where we get the most ticked off about it. When people stop suddenly, when people do things that they shouldn't be doing. Because I'm standing here doing CPR, right? If my partner driving has to hit the brakes, where do I end up?
Yeah.
Right? Probably I end up without a career ever again. Because I'm going to fly up into the front and I'm going to hit something up there, and that'll be it. My career will be done.
How pissed are you when people don't pull over? I'm
not going to say on camera that I haven't stopped in the middle of the freeway and knocked on somebody's window to ask them why they thought they were so important that they couldn't pull over for the ambulance. That might have happened.
That's awesome. Okay, Chris is certainly climbing the ranks in my superhero book. But no one is immune. This has to get to you after a while. The danger, the ugliness, the sadness. Chris is married. I wonder if there are calls that he just doesn't tell his wife about.
There's lots of calls that my wife has no idea have been done.
Just because you want to shield her from it?
Yeah.
In the past, some paramedics have taken family members on ride-alongs.
I never wanted Deb to come out on car with me, because when I go home, I have a little piece of normality when I get there. And I've come home and she's looked at me and she's gone, yeah, you've had a bad day. And it's hard for her too, because her bad day is the argument at the water cooler. My bad day is the 6-month-old that was strangled to death by her dad.
Okay, that's a very bad day. This is a high stress and high adrenaline job. So how do they deal with the stress?
We have a super strong support network within our colleagues.
So these are either active members that are still at the station, retired members, deceased members. There's one person here that I actually resuscitated.
We're always relaying stories. We're always talking about the bad calls. We're, telling my partner, telling you met some of my colleagues at the station. We'll sit on the bumper and we'll just BS for a couple of hours. And we referred to those as bumper talks. That gets most of us through our career, right? Works out really well. We still lose dozens of people a year to suicide working in emergency services. We don't see normal. But at the end of the day, there's two in the front of the truck, and sometimes you just unload. There's a lot of tears in the front of the truck that people never suspect has ever happened.
I heard a lot of the horror stories. Are there any funny ones?
3 o'clock in the morning, very well put together woman, home in Vancouver area, going on a trip. She notices her sink is leaking, so she grabs some spray foam insulation to try and seal this little bit of leak in her drain. And she gets some on her fingers. Now she has sticky fingers. Called an ambulance.
No.
It was an emergency. I'm flying out in 2 hours. I got to get to the airport. I got sticky fingers. You can't make that crap up. You just can't. Wonderful stories. Super tragic stories. The absolute best in the worst of people, and the absolute worst in the best of people. One of my most lengthy time offs was being severely beaten by a 90-year-old woman with a cane.
Okay, let's be clear. I just asked him to share a wonderful experience with me. And he's telling me this story about being beaten so badly he was off work for weeks.
Hey?
I'm shocked.
Oh, that's okay.
He thinks it's funny. But this kind of puts the whole thing together for me. Chris was physically injured on the job. But when he recounts the experience, all I hear is compassion. There it is right there. That's the whole story.
Being severely beaten by a 90-year-old woman with a cane because we couldn't resuscitate her husband. She wasn't mad at me. Her whole life, they'd been married 68 years. 68 years they'd been together, and her entire life was changing in an instant. And she's sitting there, she's just clubbing me over the back while I'm doing CPR. And I laugh to this day. I laugh about this. I was black and blue from my head to my butt for weeks after that.
Why do you love it? You seem to really love it.
I have a great passion for this job. when you get to make such a big difference in somebody's life that's enduring such a negative thing that they've needed to pick up that phone and dial 911, how can you not love this job? You make an impact every single day. And it's never about what we do, what we have, what skills we throw at them. Nobody remembers that. They don't know if I put a 20 gauge IV in or a 22 gauge or, they know I held their hand. I made them feel safe. I made a little bit of a difference in the emergency that they're having.